Mick Rooney, Radio Espial. You're very welcome. Thank you to all our recent new subscribers. The channel continues to grow. We're all very humbled that our audience has decided that Radio Espial is their go-to place for critical true crime case timelines, case features and updates. And we've a lot to come after our short summer break. But here we're already into almost mid-July. We are delighted to announce that Brian Goggin is joining our team. You're going to hear from him very shortly in this episode 51. We did tell you earlier we had some new news coming up, and this is it. We're also happy to announce that we have launched a Facebook Radio Espial community. It's free to join for all our subscribers and general viewers if you want, and there you can interact with other fellow channel members. I'll put the link in the description. So without further ado, let's get straight into this episode 51 of Radio Espial and give Brian a warm welcome. He's going to give you the basis of his background and why he came on board, and take us into episode 51, titled Missing and Murdered, Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, Misinformation. This is the first of what we plan to be about maybe 4 possible planned episodes coming up over the next 6 weeks. We've also got some other general features, docu-features coming up. Okay, let's get straight into it. Let's go straight to Brian. Brian, you're very welcome to Radio Espial.
Thanks, Mick. Honoured to be here. And I've just as a way of an introduction, I've
you bet, because there's loads of people going out there going, who the hell's he?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all right. Brian is fine, and Ciara is fine. It's just got that you're going to be seeing more of Brian as well as Ciara. So we haven't done anything to Ciara in case anybody's panicking. He's still there. He's taking a night off tonight with the kids and the wife. Okay, so don't panic.
Okay.
Brian,
Cool.
take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Right. Thanks, Mick. So I'm originally from Cork. I'm very much into writing and publishing. I edit a magazine and written a good many articles over the last 25 plus years. And I'm also staunch interest in boiling down information to get to the proper facts in cold cases, particularly missing persons, and without any drama or sensation, So I think it was very refreshing to find Radio Espial and Mick, and find people on the same wavelength with the team there. So they do great work on this channel. And what struck me really was the straight talking, dynamic attitude to things. Working out what's feasible or not, and working accordingly. If things change, reprioritize again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that on this channel it gets straight to the facts, boil things down, and get at that. And they've got their database going. And they show great respect for the victims and the families, and do all that for them as well. So it is a great channel and very refreshing to come across that, and delighted to be involved in that now.
Yeah, well, and
So,
we're very delighted to have you. And you've what I was keen and invited you to get involved is because I know, a little bit like me as a journalist, you're a writer, you're a publisher, you do other things. We don't necessarily need to pry into that, but you do other things musically. Yeah, that's one of your other interests. But as we all say, we all have previous lives, and in a previous life, you also came from, am I right, an information technology background, so you're very data and research driven.
Yeah. So of that, that should be useful there hopefully as well. So very much into data, facts, etc. So that's part of it as well.
Okay. Now, normally, what happens is, or as some of my critics might say, Mick Rooney now starts rambling on, and his guest joins in. But for the next while, you're not going to hear too much of me. You're going to hear a little bit of me when Brian needs me. But Brian is now going to introduce you to this episode. Now, just before we start, what's this episode? You can see us there, and you can see Missing and Murdered, Ireland's Vanishing Triangle, Part 1, Misinformation. This is very much Brian's work. Brian put this episode together, and this is why he's primarily doing more of the presentation than I am, and I'll join in with him as we work through it, and Brian needs me. So what we're going to do now is hand back, and I just want to say this is part 1. You can see it's marked part 1 there. We do have part 2 lined up. We're hoping that Ciara will be able to take part 2 next week and develop this on. We've outlined parts 3 and parts 4. We're not going to say much more about that. So this is kind of, almost think about it in a mini docu series as we develop this. So I'm going to hand back to Brian, and Brian is going to take you through this episode. So Brian, take it away.
Right. Thanks, Mick. So as Mick said there, this episode is the first in a series on the problem of misinformation on cases involving missing persons, many presumed murdered in Ireland, and since these tragic events first happened across a number of decades now. Now, misinformation, be it mainstream media, social media, or simple casual talk among friends, can be very damaging to missing persons cases, particularly to the victims' families, as they graft interminably on behalf of their loved ones. You know, they wake up in the morning and they've got this nightmare going on right through to when they go to bed at night, if they sleep at all. And this misinformation in particular can stall investigations. It can inhibit people who have information coming forward, because if they read something that they deem to be true, they might think, oh, that's irrelevant, they won't bother now. It can reduce interest in the cases as well, and it can reduce interest in the victims, and even worse, create confusion and needless speculation, when a lack of information can create a vacuum then. So if there's a vacuum, it's a very dangerous situation, because somebody out there will always be willing to fill that, and even when they've limited facts and only their own editorial agenda or axe to grind for grabbing headlines and delivering opinions based on nothing. So that can be a very dangerous situation. So we're not asking people not to watch things or read things. So we would ask people to please be mindful of this when you're reading or viewing material about cases, and try to be objective and go into it with your eyes open and with a questioning attitude, and always ask, who is the source of this information if something is in there? You know, and just about the cases we're about to discuss now, I think it's very important to call out that the victims' families, as we said, do monumental work in trying to locate their loved ones and to get to the bottom of their respective fates. And it's uphill a lot of the way. They get into enormous quagmires involving bureaucracy and dealing with authorities, dealing with witnesses and so on. And it's very difficult, you know. So often their work goes far beyond what they should be doing or what is expected of them by an investigation team. So we've said it before, in many cases that's been covered here. When it comes to loved ones of missing person who goes missing, despite the assistance of liaison officers and advice, they've no manual to refer to as to what they should be or should not be doing. And it makes it even more difficult. So as a consequence, you know, pressures and frustrations enter the public arena. Family relationships with the official bodies and investigation teams can become strained and fractured. And there's always third parties waiting in the wings as well, be it on social media or mainstream media entities, to hijack the messaging and direction of a case investigation. So these are all serious issues. And unless someone is experiencing this, it's impossible to fully understand what families of the missing and murder go through daily and continuously for years. So therefore, they need all the support we can get. So that's why it's important to keep information factual there. Also bear in mind the dedication and work of the Gardaí or the police or any national force under scrutiny, and the authorities in pursuing these cases, because they have a very tough job. And, you know, some horrendous crimes and crime scenes, they're certainly not, to paraphrase something that's in The Sopranos, certainly not cinematic. And a lot of these scenes are very difficult to unsee once you've seen them. And there have been instances, certainly, where Guardian authorities could have handled some cases better. And indeed, some cases were handled very badly, in fact. But in most cases, the detectives involved are very dedicated. And some, you know, a lot of them to the point of being married to the job. It's very tough going. And as well, just remember as well, with these cold cases, in particular, you know, any case really, the cold reality of working on these cases is its physical evidence, forensics, and often the most mundane of facts that must be really explored meticulously and laid out in conjunction with timings to solve these cases. And they have to really be worked the hard way. There's no shortcuts in getting to solve these cases. They have to be worked the hard way to have any hope of solving them. So here on Radio Espial, we're concerned with the facts of these cases, and all the many scores of timelines there that Mick and Ciara have presented have to show factual events with evidence to back it up. Now, when there's gaps in timelines, you don't get into wide speculation. Might present suggestions of possibilities and discuss that, but certainly don't state anything as fact unless there's evidence to back it up. And cases are built around evidence, not the other way around. So, bearing in mind all of that, communications are vital throughout investigations, particularly with the public. So it must be borne in mind, what's said and what's heard. So the two-way part of the communication, as you know. So authorities and police, or the Gardaí, can be careless with this. And I think in particular, two cases where more recently the Nicola Bully case, where intimate information was released about her and some struggles she had prior to when she went missing and before she was found. And this reminded me very much of the Claudia Lawrence case several years earlier, back in 2009, where intimate information about her was released to the public as well. And I think they were very damaging to both of those cases. And so I think the authorities can be reckless at times with that, so which isn't good. And also the media can make deliberately misleading statements containing, innuendo, speculation, outlandish theories, and things based on with no factual foundation for them. So this can be very damaging to cases and keeping them alive in the public's eye, with the view to getting information and evidence to try and solve them. Now, recent example of this in the past month, look no further than the case of missing British teenager in Tenerife, Jay Slater. Now, a case compounded by the reality that Spanish and local police forces do not operate in the same way as Irish and UK police forces in relation to public information appeals and the security of gathered evidence. So the press took over there on a lot of that. Once again, when an information void appears, there's no shortage of people happy to fill that void with information, speculation and conspiracy theories. So we saw a lot of that there, Mick, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And we always say this with cases that we do, and we've dealt with a few foreign cases, and people ask, well, why didn't this happen, or isn't this normally the way it happens? And you've got, in that case, specifically the case that everybody's talking about at the moment, in regards to misinformation, the reason why we kind of in our notes mention it is because, my God, that is the most spectacular example right now happening of confusion, misinformation. And I saw this in the Nicola Bully case as well. Literally, YouTube channels were built in one day primarily about this case and were broadcasting several times a day. Every time there was Nicola had a slice of toast and a cup of tea for breakfast. Nicola drove a silver car. There was entire programs built about the tiniest of details.
Yeah.
And the family were under the absolute scrutiny. And with the Jay Slater case, which is still a heavily developing case at the moment, we're seeing exactly the same drama play out, with fingers being pointed at girlfriends, friends, people they were associated with, the family, that this is a setup, the family are all involved in it. It's just, and we're going to talk about this, I think, as we mention our 6 cases on that Sky was it the Silent Killing? Document. We want to speak a little bit about the whole idea of misinformation. And look, the only thing I'm going to say on that recent Jay Slater case is it's a developing case, and yes, I always take on board that sometimes information comes out in social media and there is a substance of truth in what's coming out, but it's bits of information that people seize on and then they run like a headless horse with it without validating and checking it out. Where did the source come from? You know, how much truth is in this? And then it creates a whole new avenue on conspiracy theory. And I think we're looking more at the below level investigative, hardcore level investigation in a case. And we're looking at that. And what we're trying to get at is, when we look at cases, what's actually true. Not what's just said on social media. That's fine. And yes, I'm perfectly open to the idea that sometimes there are so-called conspiracy theories in a case that suddenly you realise actually 60 or 70% of this actually does have legs. There is actually some significant substance in it. But the unfortunate thing is people run off in different directions with it and it gets all askew. And I do think with the Jay Slater case, that's probably where we're going. Actually, maybe 60-70% of what's been said on social media, because we're talking about a lot of young people, and a lot of young people are social media active and talk, and I think we're seeing a case that is like an express train developing every day. And the problem is, it's one of the reasons why on Radio Espial, when it comes to the idea of misinformation, it's why we don't. If Jay Slater was an Irishman in Tenerife, we might be covering it, but we wouldn't be covering it day to day. And it's one of the reasons why we don't cover and do lives and cover a case day to day. We generally deal with a case at a minimum after the first month or two, because we know there's so much happening in that first month and you cannot accurately cover it because you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the angles in it. Sorry, Brian, I'm going to hand back to you.
Wow. Yeah, definitely, Mick. All right, thanks, Mick. So we move on now to complete the introduction there. We move on to the main what we're here to look at. Now, with many missing persons in Ireland, now mostly presumed murdered since the tragic events first happened over 25 years ago, misinformation now often dwarfs factual data. And we're not just talking about minor errors. Now, Mick touched on it there. You know, this can range from factual inaccuracies to non-stories to outlandish, easily disproved, thoughtless and illogical speculation. Like, I mean, in one case there was one guy who committed a murder in Dublin there a few years ago, and a gruesome murder. And, you know, they were talking about him being a potential serial killer back in the 90s, and he would have been only 14 or 15. So, you know, things like that are just, you know, ridiculous. So that'd be one end of the scale. But, you know, we lost count of the number of missing persons cases reported in the media where very basic details like age, description and background as well aren't even reported accurately. And this, unfortunately, now stretches to so-called professional media productions and documentaries with all their radio and TV fanfare, you know. And we want to focus as well now particularly on the so-called Vanishing Triangle. And that spawned a whole industry with books, podcasts, documentaries, TV shows. And in terms of media, again, we're not asking people not to watch such shows or read books. Just be objective with the sources as possible. Do your homework. Make up your own mind based on the available evidence and confirm factual information. And if you see something that seems, God, this is outlandish stuff, I know truth can be stranger than fiction. It's not to say it's not true, but dig into it and have a look at it and make up your own mind. I mean, the sad reality in today's world is that, you know, tragedy becomes a media product, and is shaped and sold to the public. We're only happy to consume it. And, you know, it's like a lot of these parts have become commodities, and editorial decisions take over, agendas are created, public emotions are baited for profit, not transparency and accuracy of the case, and the facts are lost then. So in essence, the media cajole and encourage the audience to enter a world based on opinion and heavily driven emotion. So again, a dangerous situation, and can get away from the facts of the case. Now, we're going to discuss now Operation Trace and the 6 original cases there. So the original 6 cases that were, Operation Trace was set up in 1998 by a Garda task force to look into the disappearance of 6 women in Leinster, now over the period from 1993 to 1998. Now, those women you may know already were Annie McCarrick in 1993, Jojo Dullard in 1995, Fiona Pender in 1996, Ciara Breen in 1997, Fiona Sinnott in 1998, and Deirdre Jacob later on in 1998. And they were the 6 original Operation Trace disappearances. So, Mick, did you want to add anything in there in relation to the summary there?
Other than we have the follow-up to this episode that we're doing, like, just to be clear with people, we're taking a broad look in this episode at how the media and all aspects of it, social media, people interested in true crime and following cases and how cases develop, and the broad basis of this kind of mini series that you're going to see. In episode 2, we're going to get more into these 6 cases that that Brian has mentioned, and we're going to be very frank with you. We're not, in our second episode that's going to come up, we've done episodes on timelines on all of these cases that we've just listed: the Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dullard, Fiona Pender, Ciara Breen, Fiona Sinnott, and Deirdre Jacob. But what we are going to do is we're going to show you in much more detail how the investigators reached their prime or primary suspects. And in most cases, we're going to name those suspects, and we're going to talk a little bit about those suspects in those 6 cases. And this more leads into why we are where we are, and the point that Brian is about to talk to you next about, because it's led into a perception in Ireland over 2 decades, and I think Brian is going to agree with me on this, that somehow Ireland has had a rampaging serial killer, and that 1 or maybe just 2 people are responsible for multiple crimes, and that the people we've just listed above are all linked by the same people. And we're going to show you the evidence that says this whole Vanishing Triangle idea is a total and fucking illusion created by the media. There is no police investigation, no force Operation Trace, the Garda Special Crimes Unit, no one from them have ever talked about serial killers or, you know, a single person connected with all the... It's naturally because of being investigated and being professional. It's been looked at and examined, but no evidence has ever been found on it. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Mick. So Mick said there, yeah, agreed. And I mean, the Operation Trace did look at the possibility of a serial killer, but it never coined the phrase the Vanishing Triangle. That came from the media, and they didn't conclude that there was any evidence linking one case with multiple other cases. So this is the media invention, you know, and crime journalists are happy to indulge on this and themselves on this and bait their audience with this. And as I said, it's created a whole industry, you know, around this Vanishing Triangle business. And there's 2 incorrect beliefs in relation to these cases. Firstly, the idea that a serial killer was responsible for all of them. And second, that the culprit was one Larry Murphy, the nation's favourite suspect. Now, this misinformation is very damaging to those cases in a number of ways. You know, it may discourage, as I said already, this could discourage people who come across new information from coming forward if they assume Murphy is responsible because they've been hearing this for so long. And it could allow the actual perpetrators to remain free as well. And, you know, it's propagating false information. So, you know, it's just can do awful damage to these cases, and families have to work even harder then to, you know, to put forward what they believe to have happened. So, in fact, Larry Murphy's a firm suspect only in Deirdre Jacobs' tragic disappearance and murder in Newbridge in 1998. Now, a file was sent to the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, in relation to that, but there wasn't enough to charge. So that's already dealt with. You can see the Deirdre Jacob timeline, if more information on that. And just further to what we said above about this belief about a serial killer, Mick and Ciara put together an extensive database on missing persons cases and murder cases in Ireland, and they found no evidence of any connections between the cases or a serial killer. And we'll go on a bit now and talk about just the process there at a high level of what happens in these investigations, and then about suspects in some specific cases. Now, when spreading the kind of narrative we talked about there about the serial killer and Larry Murphy and so on, and the Vanishing Triangle, evidence and official events that have taken place which would dispel this myth have been ignored or downplayed. So there are firm suspects in several of the cases that we mentioned there, and files have been sent to the DPP, or Director of Public Prosecutions, indicating evidence in some cases. Now, just in simple terms, very simply, if a file with evidence on a case is sent to the DPP, this indicates the Gardaí who would prepare the file have a strong suspect that they believe there's enough evidence there to submit it to the DPP to try and prosecute the suspect. Now, it's similar. If you watch Law and Order in America, it's a different flavour of the same thing. The cops there put together the evidence. They go to the district attorney. His office decides whether to prosecute or not. It's similar enough. So you don't need to understand all the ins and outs of it. Ultimately, it's the DPP's decision whether to prosecute or not, and they often deem that the evidence is insufficient to proceed with charging the suspect. For example, with the Deirdre Jacob case, they deemed there wasn't sufficient evidence to charge Larry Murphy there. Now, more on that later with some of the other cases. Now, out of the 6 cases there, with the case of Fiona Pender, Ciara Breen and Fiona Sinnott, they're firm suspects for their respective murders and disappearances. And as I read in one place, a local comment in one place said, the dogs in the street know what happened here. So, there's the cases there where it's very clear what happened, just the evidence, they haven't been able to pull together sufficient evidence for the DPP to bring charges against the suspect. Now, just looking at Fiona Pender, she was last seen on the 23rd of August 1996, and the only suspect for her murder and 4 of his close relatives were questioned in 1997 but released. Now, a file was reportedly being prepared for the DPP, but there was insufficient evidence to bring charges at the time, and that remains the case. Nobody's been prosecuted in relation to her disappearance and murder. The suspect's not Larry Murphy, and even though the media have mentioned that Fiona's late uncle, Detective Chief Superintendent Sean Cummins' jurisdiction once included Murphy, that does not link him to the case. And in fact, he was later head of the GNCBI, the Garda National Criminal Bureau of Investigation later, and which made him the most senior investigative detective in the state. So at that point, Sean Cummins' jurisdiction was actually national, so it covered all residents of Ireland, which means, if you use that logic, everybody in Ireland was a suspect. So ridiculous. So anyway, for Fiona Pender's disappearance and murder, there's a timeline under episode 40 there of Radio Espial. So please watch that and get more information there. Did you want to add anything on that there, Mick?
No, the only thing I would add, because you just mentioned it there, in regards you were talking about the DPP. Look, just very quickly and very broadly, what happens is an investigation team. It doesn't matter whether you're South Africa, the US, the UK, or Ireland, or anywhere in Europe. Cases investigated, whether it's a murder, a body is found, a charge is considered. If there's sufficient reason to go to a judge and say, we need to arrest suspect A and suspect B, or just suspect A, or a whole host of suspects, we think they're connected in some way, information is provided to the judge. The judge goes, yeah, we've reasonable cause here to arrest those people. There's the warrant, go out, arrest them. They're brought in, they're interviewed, more information is gathered, it's processed, and yes, often I know people get pissed off when you hear, oh, but he must have done it, she must have done it, but they let them go, you can't do that, they're not convicted. You can't hold somebody. You can interview them up to a period of, firstly I think it's 12 hours, extended to 24, it can be extended to 48, and then in the odd circumstance to 72. But each process requires a judge to step in and say, yeah, but give me a reason why you want to hold them longer. Give me another reason why you want to hold them even longer. Give me another reason why we should now bring them to court. Okay, you want to go ahead with your arrest? You want to go ahead? Okay. You want to you're charging them. Okay. What are you charging them on? What's the basis? So each stage gets developed, and eventually we get to a point where a charge is made, that file is processed, and then it's submitted to the Department of Public Prosecution. It's assessed, it's looked at on the basis of, okay, the police, here's the file, here's all the evidence that they believe they have. Is there enough, having charged this person, to progress it to a trial? Is there enough basis? And sometimes, not all the time, the DPP will turn around and say, we do not believe there's sufficient evidence. We believe that the defence will have a stronger case to argue, and this will collapse, or it probably won't even get the trial. And that's why a DPP will refer back to the Gardaí or whatever police force in whatever state and say, we cannot progress with this case. You do not have enough evidence. And that's the way it works. And eventually, if there is enough evidence, we get the trial, and that person has their fair hearing at a trial. And that's the way the process works. And it doesn't matter what you think or what your opinions are, or how wrong or right you think the system is. That's the way it works in a democracy. And you might hate the person and think they did it and hate what they did, but they still deserve a fair trial. And as a public, we can then dispel all the conspiracy theories and the social media nattering and the talk and the opinions, and we can see the actual raw evidence presented in court as to why this person ended up there charged with that crime, and all the evidences and the proof of that evidence. Brian, please, continue.
Spot on, Mick. Yeah. So that's the process, and that's it. So also in the case of Ciara Breen's disappearance on 13th of February 1997, Liam Mullen, who died in 2017, was the only suspect in her murder, and several files were sent to the DPP on him over the years since Ciara's disappearance. Now, whether they could have got enough evidence together or not, he died in 2017, so no charges could be brought anyway. No, even if enough evidence was there. But I mean, the hope now is that they can locate her remains. And again, see Radio Espial episode 41 for a full timeline on Ciara Breen's disappearance and murder. So Larry Murphy had no involvement in this. There was no serial killer there. Liam Mullen is thought to be suspect. He was the main suspect there, but it was never proved against him. So that was the thinking there, and he wasn't convicted either. So there's been nothing proved in relation to that either.
Incidentally, Brian, if I just might mention, because I forgot to say it, as Brian lists these episodes, I will put the links in the description under this video, so in your own time you can take a look at the individual cases. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Grand Mick, yeah, beyond the video there. So that was Ciara Breen's case. Fiona Sinnott in Wexford was last seen in the early hours of 9th of February in the company of her ex-boyfriend and the father of her baby daughter then, from whom she had split up with following several years of physical abuse. Now, her disappearance was formally upgraded to a murder inquiry in 2005, and a file was sent to the DPP in September 2005 about the only suspect in her murder, not Larry Murphy. And also some of his accomplices were included in the evidence that was put into that file. So again, for more information on that, see Radio Espial episode 42, and you'll get the full timeline there of Fiona Sinnott's disappearance and murder. So there are three cases there outright that of them where they're not victims of a serial killer, and certainly wasn't Larry Murphy either. Now, there's also been attempts to apply the serial killer / Larry Murphy theory to other cases outside of the original 6 Operation Trace cases as well. And some of them, again, have firm suspects. So, I mean, Imelda Keenan, originally from Mount Mellick in County Laois, lived in a flat in Waterford City on Lombard Street. She was reported missing 3rd of January 1994 by her then fiancé Mark Wall, and her family firmly believe she was murdered up to over a week before this date, and that the timeline of her disappearance was falsely reported by her murderer, who again is not Larry Murphy. Now, there's two features there, or rather appeals there, titled Missing Imelda Keenan Case Updates. There's the Family Appeal Update in August 23 and the Case Update Appeal from January 2024, both available on Radio Espial as well. So Imelda Keenan's case, again, it is outside of the original 6 cases, but she's often included in the Vanishing Triangle discussions, and certainly there was no serial killer or Larry Murphy involved in that either. So just other cases then, when a missing person's body's been found, attempts have been made to link Larry Murphy to those cases as well. In particular, one that's been covered again in Radio Espial, Antoinette Smith. She went missing on the 12th of July 1987 after going to a concert and coming back into Dublin, and her body was found on the 4th of April 1988.
Brian,
now,
can I just say,
go ahead,
at the point, it's actually Antoinette's anniversary. I think the 37th anniversary. I think it's just gone. So we are all are thinking of her family in that case. And I just want to say, we did put an update out under the comment section of that episode we did on Annette Smith. If I think about it, I'll put a card up here so you can go to it. But again, it's one of those cases where we go to the 35th year, the 36th year, the 37th year, and it's the same appeal by the Garda. We know somebody lightly connected or knew her in some way, maybe involved, or that somebody in the community has more information. Will you please come forward? And that is such a running theme in so many of the cases we're talking about here. Ciara, Breen, Imelda, so many of the other women, Fiona, both Fionas, Fiona Pender and Fiona Sinnott. Brian, sorry, continue.
Yeah, correct, Mick. And I think this Antoinette Smith's case there, as Mick said, the anniversary, please come forward if you have any information. Very sad, tragic case. And in terms of misinformation there as well, I think her ex-husband suffered a lot of ire from armchair trolls as well, and he certainly wasn't involved. I think they had a good, even though they were separated, they still retained a lot of affection and respect for each other and managed rearing their 2 daughters between them as well. So that was, a lot of nonsense there as well. They were directed to him. So anyway, Mrs. Smith's remains were found with the bag over her head, and some commentators have taken this, as well as the removal of her shoes at the scene that was discovered at the scene. They've taken that as evidence that Larry Murphy was responsible for her murder because he'd used the same method during an attack on the woman from Carlow for which he was apprehended. Now, that's certainly not conclusive or even circumstantial evidence. I mean, other killers have put bags over their victims' heads. For example, Dennis Radar, the BTK killer. No, Dennis Radar was a native of Wichita, and he was he committed several horrible murders back in the 70s. Then he went into quiescence for nearly 30 years and then came out again in the 2000s and just started wreaking havoc again. And he was a bit, I think he kind of, his arrogance got the better of him and he fell on his own sword because he sent email message from his church's computer, and that was his undoing because it was traced back to him then because he was one who taunted the police. BTK is bind, torture, kill, which was his method, and he was some horrific stuff. But another one of his methods was putting bags over victims' heads. Also, Colin Ireland, the gay slayer in London, he employed the same method. So finding something like that isn't conclusive evidence that somebody else who's employed the same method was guilty of a particular murder. So, and that's the case with Antoinette Smith's when her body was discovered. So again, see Radio Espial episode 32 for a full timeline and discussion on Antoinette Smith's disappearance and tragic murder. And again, we remember her on her anniversary this month as well. So, Mick, anything else you wanted to add on that?
No. I think we've spoken and reflected as well on the cases. And as I say, if anybody wants to go to the descriptions and click them, all the cases that we're talking about are there. We're going to get into those 6 core Vanishing Triangle cases more a little bit in the next episode, and talk to you more about the actual suspects and why these suspects came about, and that, as we always say in most of these cases, and we're probably leading now into our sort of our conclusion bit, Brian, in a sense that it's an old adage that generally when something tragic happens and somebody goes missing, one, more often than not, the person is found, but there's a small percentage of cases of people who do go missing and are not found. And even the devastating impact to a family that person is found missing and a body is found, or not found but still presumed murdered, it has huge consequences. And unfortunately, our theme in this episode is about how media and the general public can take a case like that and run with it and invent their own case, their own conclusions without any real evidence, and it's all just based on opinion and speculation. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we face here on Radio Espial when we delve into cases. Would you not agree?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, unfortunately, some of these false narratives, they end up being broadcast out on big networks and internationally and everything as well, and creates a perception of things here, the way cases are run this country and so on as well. So I mean, it's these false narratives can grow legs and propagate out to a much wider audience.
Again, back to that, lies go around the world, once or twice before truth has ever got out of bed,
Yeah, correct, yeah. And it's very, very damaging. So I think from here, our next episode in the Misinformation series will deal in depth with the misinformation around the Vanishing Triangle cases, dig into it more, and dispel some of the myths around this imaginary polygon, because you could draw a triangle of any size and try and link things up that way,
as has been done.
So I mean, we could draw a triangle that goes out to outer Mongolia and Kazakhstan and say, oh yeah, these must be connected here, but it's doesn't prove anything. And as I said, you fit the cases to evidence, not the other way around. So yeah, the next episode we'll dig more into that around the Vanishing Triangle case.
What we're going to do in the next episode is look at the 6 cases, flesh them out just a little bit more, because we've already done episodes on them, but more in line with who are the suspects. We're going to name those suspects if we legally can, and tell you why the Gardaí got to that point, and how this idea of a serial killer doesn't apply. And we're also going to briefly take a look at, I think, about another, I don't know what it is, Brian, this on our databases, about another 6 or 10 cases that even Operation Trace also had an eye on, and also considered, should we have also been looking at those cases and what connections there might be. And if they're there, we'll say it. If they're not, we'll say it. So that's a lot of that is coming up in the next episode. Sorry, Brian.
And some of those cases, so some of those cases were neglected. But in areas as well. So it's important that they're highlighted as well. So I think just to wrap up, then I think just to reiterate again, misinformation can be very damaging to missing persons cases, and particularly to the victims' families and all the work they do. It can stall investigation, inhibit people coming forward with new information, reduce interest in the cases and victims, and worse. So just please be mindful of this when reading or viewing material about these cases. Do so with your eyes open, be objective, do your homework, question sources, and please call out misinformation when you see it and share the real confirmed facts of the cases. So I'll hand you back to Mick now. Thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, that was Brian Goggin, one of our new contributors, and you're gonna hear from Brian an awful lot in the coming weeks, and months he'll be with us for other episodes. Sometimes you'll see just me and Ciara together. Sometimes you'll see me and Brian together. And you might even see all three of us come together for certain episodes, and we're thinking of including that in a later link to this maybe 3 or 4 part mini piece that we're doing. We'll be doing lots of other things as well with features. But look, Brian, thank you for doing all that work on this episode. I know you put an awful lot of time into it. And again, as we always say, and I say when we do these episodes and cases, and Brian, you'll vouch for this, this didn't begin yesterday or the day before. You were looking at this months ago, and you approached me about this suggestion about misinformation. I think it's gone back to, was it March, April? I think we were. That's how far back the planning of episodes go when we put them together in these cases. Look, that's it. We're done and dusted for this episode. Thank you, Brian. We're going to hopefully see you again soon. But for now, thank you to Brian and for joining us for this episode, all of you. Thank you again. I might say we're overwhelmed, and thank you for the recent new subscribers. We've had an awful lot of new subscribers who joined, and I was a little bit surprised because I know we've been a little bit quiet in recent weeks. I've been on holiday. The other guys have been taking time out, but we're back full on now, I can assure you of that. We will let you know about the follow-up episode when that's coming out. We're hoping to have it next week, and we have some other I've now got 5 different features lined up, so there's lots coming in over the next month or two. And Ciara is also going to be developing our social media community. So that's a Radio Espial community on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. I'll put it in the links in this video. As always, God bless and take care of each other.